There's many philosophers and thinkers and gurus and mystics and all sorts of people out there who say that reality is pure consciousness, it's pure mind, just that's what everything is. Now, this is something that I used to say, but I stopped saying it because I figured out that I meant something entirely different than what those people meant, as I talked to a lot of people who were of that position, saying that everything is mind or like reality is this infinite consciousness and things like that. I started talking to some of these people and I found out that because I meant something entirely different than what they meant, it would confuse people way too much if I continued to say that. And also, not only that, but saying that everything is consciousness actually glossed over a lot of the features and details of certain topics that I would discuss. So, if you want a bit of insight into what exactly that difference is, I posted a link to a page that I wrote up down below. I also posted that beneath my last video. So, if you want to give that a quick read, pause this video, go through that real quick, and then come back. You can go ahead and do that right now. Or if you would rather just read it as a sort of summary after this video, that's fine too. But that will give you a little bit of insight into what exactly is going on here. And you'll see that the difference isn't really like a distinction. It's not like a dualistic difference. It's more that what I'm talking about is broader and more inclusive than what people tend to mean when they say that everything is consciousness. So it's not that there's like their opinion over here and then mine over here. Like they're not like incompatible or separate or entirely distinct. No, it's just that there's a sort of included in mine. So like mine includes theirs, but then it also includes some other things that they don't agree with that they might think is sort of like delusional or funky or just not correct at all. Right? So it's like I would fully agree with them, but they would not fully agree with me, right? It's a one-way street, sort of. So let's go into what exactly that difference is by looking at what exactly I figured out through some of these conversations. I would talk to some of these people and we would say, okay, like, yeah, we think reality is boundless, right? Okay, so we would agree on that, even though there's no proof that it is. That's just, where we're coming from, sort of, right? So we think reality is infinite, it's boundless. We call it absolute infinity in that way because it's absolutely boundless. And so we would say, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? What does it mean for reality to be absolutely infinite? What sorts of things would it include? What sorts of things would be real? What sorts of things would exist? And we would start having discussions on that. Like, okay, well, obviously, if reality is infinite, there has to be an experience of what it's like to be a human being. Voila, here you are right now, having a human experience, right? This is something that would naturally, inevitably exist in a limitless reality, right? Because it can't be limited. So, well, you'll see later that it can be, but just for lack of a better term, at the moment, it's going to be unlimited. And so it's going to naturally include all sorts of experiences, including the human one you're having right now. Okay, but go further. If it's unlimited, it's not just going to include human experiences, it's also going to include the experience of what it's like to be each and every type of animal. So a lizard, a lion, a giraffe. Okay, so far so good. As I would have discussions like this with various people, we would still be agreeing with each other so far. Yeah, okay, we have human experiences, we have lizard experiences, we have lion experiences. There's all these different varieties of conscious experiences that are included within this limitless reality. Okay, what about plants? Well, yeah, sure, if it's unlimited, there should be an experience of what it's like to be a plant, right? Okay, so that's, you could say, contained within the domain of conscious experience. What about rocks? Okay, yeah, rocks too. There should be such a thing as a conscious experience of what it's like to be a rock. But then we go further and further and further, and then I would bring up, okay, what about the existence of materialistic realities? So realities that are entirely devoid of consciousness. There are no conscious experiences happening. It's just entirely 100% unconscious matter. Absolute infinity includes universes and realities like that, doesn't it? That's what I would say. And these people would be like, no, 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 no. Everything is mind. Everything is consciousness. Materialism is a delusion. There's no such thing as materialism. It's not true. There's no materialistic universes. There's no materialistic realities. That's where we would reach a disagreement. So see, we would get to a point where they would put up this limit. They would say, okay, no, reality can't include that. That's impossible. Materialism is impossible. Unconsciousness is impossible. And I would say, well, no, if it's absolutely infinite, it has to be entirely, completely limitless, such that it does, or at least can, include materialistic stuff. Not just materialistic stuff, not even just unconscious stuff, but an endless variety of other things beyond consciousness or unconsciousness. So some third thing that's entirely alien to both consciousness or unconsciousness. A fourth thing that's entirely different from that, and a fifth thing, and a sixth thing, and a seventh thing. Or even go crazier than that, unite all those infinitely many things in a sort of non-dualistic manner. It's got to include that too, right? It's got to include just all this strange, wacky stuff because it is so boundless. But no, as I discussed this with people, they didn't really agree with that. They would say, no, there's just consciousness. There's no unconsciousness. There's no materialism. There's no third thing or fourth thing or fifth thing. All these endless things you're talking about, they're just delusions. Essentially, they're not real. But see, then I would say, okay, then why call reality absolutely infinite? If it's to be absolutely limitless, it could include all the things that I'm talking about. Now, yeah, sure, you don't have to believe that, those things exist. Obviously, you can just believe that I'm delusional. That's fine. But all I'm saying is that if I'm right, and if reality is absolutely infinite, then yes, it's gonna include all the infinitely many varieties of other stuff. And it's going to have all those united together in one coherent absolute infinity, right? If it's absolutely limitless, it can't be limited to consciousness. Even if consciousness is infinite, right? It can't even be limited to limitlessness, right? So it can't even be limited to infinity itself. So even if consciousness is limitless, to say that it can't break beyond that limitlessness is still not absolute infinity. To be absolutely limitless, it's got to even be able to break beyond limitlessness itself. Now, for those of you who are into the deeper subjects, you'll know that subsistence is an entirely different story than that. But no, with absolute infinity, yeah, it can break beyond limitlessness itself. It can break beyond even infinite consciousness and include all those other things. So then you may wonder, okay, well then Ethan, why would you say that everything is consciousness? If you're saying that there's also unconsciousness and things that are neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, why even say everything is consciousness in the first place? Why even utter that sentence? Well, because here's what I meant whenever I would say everything is consciousness. What I meant is that, again, let's imagine an absolutely boundless reality. If it is completely unlimited and unconstrained, then it can't be constrained to consciousness, not even to infinite consciousness. So it's going to be able to include unconsciousness and things that are neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, and things beyond that, on and on and on, etc., forever, right? So it's going to be unconstrained in that way, but guess what? If it's unconstrained, that also means that it's going to be capable of paradoxes and contradictions. All right? Again, subsistence is an entirely different story for those of you who are into those subjects. But in absolute infinity, contradictions and paradoxes are able to happen. And one such example of a contradiction that exists is that if absolute infinity is entirely unconstrained, then it's gonna be capable of experiencing everything, right? Like if there was something, let's just posit some object, if there existed some object such that reality was not capable of having an experience of that thing, that would be a limit on reality, right? In order for reality to be completely limitless, it has to be capable of having an experience of what it is like to be that thing, even if that thing is unconscious and lacks experience altogether. That's where the contradiction comes in, is that if reality is boundless, it has to, one, be able to include things outside of consciousness, even if consciousness is infinite, but two, it then has to simultaneously be capable of having an experience of what it is like to be those unconscious things, even though by definition, those unconscious things, unconscious things lack experience. No, something caught my throat there. But yeah, it has to be capable of both, right? It's got to be capable of having unconscious things, but then simultaneously being able to experience them. Do you see the contradiction there? So yes, it is a paradox, it is illogical, but that sort of irrationality should not be a problem for reality if it is fully unconstrained and absolutely infinite, right? So if reality is unlimited to the extent that it is capable of consciously experiencing anything and everything, then it's going to be capable of having a conscious experience of even the things that are unconscious and lack experience. Not only that, it's going to be capable of having a conscious experience of the stuff that is neither conscious nor unconscious. And then it's going to be capable of having an experience of what it's like to be whatever the fourth variety of stuff is beyond consciousness, unconsciousness, or neither of them. And then it's going to be capable of having an experience of each of the domains beyond that, all the infinitely many domains, beyond consciousness, beyond unconsciousness, beyond neither, beyond the fourth thing. It's going to be capable of having experiential access to all of them such that it can be conscious in all of them. Quite literally, it has conscious access to all of them, even if they have no consciousness, or even if they neither have consciousness nor no consciousness, right? Notice that I'm speaking in pure contradictory terms here, but that is the point. That is precisely how boundless it is that it allows for that sort of irrationality. That's what I always meant every time I used to say that everything is consciousness. I didn't mean that reality is constrained to only including consciousness, and things like unconsciousness or materialism and all that stuff is just delusional nonsense. No. What I meant is that reality does extend beyond consciousness. It does include things that are unconscious and materialistic and neither conscious nor unconscious and all the infinitely many other things, right? It just flies off forever, But that even though those things are genuinely beyond consciousness, this unlimited reality is so limitless that it is capable of having a conscious experience of what it is like to be those things, even if they're completely different than consciousness itself. It's able to unify all of them in that way, right? Like an explosive non-duality or triviality. That's what I always meant by everything is conscious or everything is consciousness. So yes, reality does include unconscious atoms. It does include other types of unconscious matter or philosophical zombies, like beings that have no direct experience. It does include all of that, if you ask me. But despite including those things, you are then going to have this contradiction of reality also having experiences of what it is like to be those things, even though those things don't have any experience at all. That's the contradiction that it is capable of because it is unconstrained. Therefore, it is not constrained to classical logic. It does not have to behave rationally, at least not classically. Maybe in a sort of trivial sense it can, but not classically. You see? So this is why I stopped saying that. This is why I stopped saying that absolute infinity is consciousness or that everything is consciousness, because I ended up confusing two different things, right? Two different meanings of that. Because when other people say it, like Bernardo Kastrup, he's a philosopher who says that everything is consciousness, but he doesn't mean it the way I do. He does not believe that there's such a thing as materialism or that there's such a thing as unconscious objects or like philosophical zombies. He doesn't believe in that. But when I talk about absolute infinity, what I'm talking about is something that is so boundless that it does inevitably include those things, because it is so boundless that it includes anything and everything, including philosophical zombies and unconscious matter and things that are neither conscious nor unconscious and all the endless varieties of other things. Rupert Spira, he's a spiritual teacher who, like Bernardo Kastrup, thinks that everything is just mind. There's nothing besides consciousness. But again, that is too limiting compared to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that is absolutely limitless. So unlike what Rupert Spira means, what I mean is that there are indeed things beyond consciousness. It is just that reality is able to then have conscious access to those things in a contradictory way, such that we can say that it has conscious access to everything, therefore everything is conscious or everything is consciousness. Even though there are things that are not consciousness, right? Again, it's paradoxical, it's irrational. Actualize.org, that's another channel that talks about this. Leo does not think there's such a thing as material realities. I've talked about some of this stuff with him as well as other people. No, he does not think that it's possible for reality to be finite or materialistic, whereas I would say that reality is so limitless that it is not even limited to limitlessness itself, which means that it is so limitless that it is capable of not being limitless. It can be limited, it can be finite. That is how infinite it is. It's so infinite that it can be purely finite. Again, it is not limited even to limitlessness itself. That is how limitless it is. I know this all sounds like Zen gibberish, but that's the point. It's supposed to sort of drop the mind, drop the intellect, drop classical logic and rationality. So if you notice that it's nonsense, you're getting the point. Take it as a literal riddle. Who else? Deepak Chopra. He's another person who says that everything is consciousness, but again, he does not mean it in the way that I mean it here, or in the way that I ever meant it in the past. Because then he does not believe that unconscious things are possible or that they could ever be real. I'm saying that they can be real. It's just that even if they are, reality is going to be capable of having a conscious experience of what it is like to be those things. That's how you can say everything is consciousness. So it's technically correct to say, quote unquote, everything is consciousness. And I mean that literally. I mean, it is literally correct on a technicality. In a literal sense, it is technically correct to say that everything is consciousness, which is why I would always say it. But it's just that saying that sentence of quote unquote everything is consciousness is not enough, right? It's like a finger pointing at the moon. It's not enough to give you the full detail of what the moon is like. It points you towards it, but it doesn't give you the full detail because there's a lot of details that sentence glosses over. Because whenever I would say it, that sentence would gloss over the fact that no, there are unconscious things. There are things that are even neither conscious nor unconscious, and there's infinitely many other things beyond those. But reality has experiential access to them such that it's still technically correct to say that everything is conscious or included within consciousness because reality has conscious access to them. Do you see that? But that's all very confusing to people, right? And I like to update my articulations to have more clarity such that they are less confusing to people. So that's why I stopped saying that, right? Because it glosses over way too many details. It's too insufficient of a pointer, right? I like to have better pointers to show you more details of the moon, so to speak. So now I simply just say reality is trivial, right? Meaning it includes anything and everything. I've always said that, though. I've always said that reality is anythingness. So that part's not new. But rather than looking at the fact that reality has conscious access to everything, I now bring to mind the details that, well, let's look at what everything is. Yeah, sure, it has conscious access to everything. But everything includes unconscious things, right? If it didn't, it wouldn't be everything. So in order for it to include everything, it has to include unconscious things and infinitely many other things beyond consciousness or unconsciousness. It's just that then in a contradictory manner, it's going to have the experiential access even to those things. Because if it wasn't able to access them or have an experience of what it's like to be them, then that would also mean that it's too limited. So it's got to have both, even if having both creates these contradictions where it's having experiences of what it is like to be unconscious things that don't have any experience. But again, that's where it breaks classic rationality. It breaks it completely, such that it's able to have all these existential paradoxes and illogical contradictions. That's the sort of trivial logic that's going on here. Anyways, let me know if that's easy enough to understand. Hopefully that wasn't too brain twisting or confusing. Again, maybe after some of these videos you actually feel dumber rather than more intelligent. Hopefully I didn't make your brain fall out. Hopefully you can still use it. But if you have any questions, let me know. And until next time, you all create a nice day.